Hello everyone and welcome. Make a cup of your favorite drink and get comfortable because this is a wonderful time for news stories from YellowCat. Send your own stories in the comments below and maybe they'll be in our new video. Lawyers of Reddit. Is there a time where you said, "F it, you are on your own" to a client? So, one time I was appointed to represent a guy who was having a trial for adjudication in a dependency case. He wasn't at fault for the removal of his children and was effing peed off that he had to be party to the case, it's the law, so he's yelled at me for several weeks about this and I've simply said, I can't do S about it, man, it's the law. So he threatens to fire me and I say go for it. He rescinds, repeat, this happens a few times. So we get to court and the judge comes in and says, any issues to go over before we start? My guy stands up and says, I want to fire my lawyer because he's not gonna help me. The judge looks at me and asks if that's true, and I said, no, Mr. X is angry that he's a party to this case because Miss X is the offender. He doesn't believe me when I say that it's simply the law. Judge asks him if he agrees, and he says he doesn't think he can trust me to represent his interests. So the judge lets me go, I close my folio and hand him the file, ask to be withdrawn, granted, I turn and head for the door. As I'm walking out, the judge says, okay, Mr. X, who's your first witness? X gets mad and yells about needing an attorney, to which the judge replies, you're allowed appointed counsel and you fired him. We're still going forward. Who's your first witness? I couldn't see it, but I know that I was smiling in 5D. Yes, when they told me I got a different attorney. Nothing to do about that, but provide a copy of their file and terminate the representation, maybe a notice to the court depending on circumstances. Upon one occasion, I remember thinking, oh, thank God I get to be done with this effer. Not mine, but I wrote the Wikipedia article. Marvin Gabrione punched his attorney in the face in front of the jury. During the trial, that lawyer asked the judge for permission to quit and was denied. Personally, I feel like the evidence against him was pretty cut and dry. Basically, everyone he comes in contact with disappears mysteriously. And I don't have evidence of this, but I can't imagine that lawyer really giving it his all after that. He later appealed the guilty verdict on the basis that him punching the attorney in the face in front of the jury could have prejudiced the jury against him. Not a lawyer, been a legal assistant / paralegal for 18 years. One that stands out, she wasn't a client for a week when she screamed her head off at the poor receptionist. Lucky me got to tell her it wasn't the receptionist's fault she didn't have an appointment. I booked her one for the next morning. Next morning, I handed her paperwork and retainer and told her we wouldn't act for her. I got to do it because as good as the lawyer was in court, he hated confrontation. We had a similar instance to this last year as a civil engineering consultant. A property developer phoned up, shouted at one of the receptionists, saying he had to talk to someone working on his project. Only one available was a grad / junior engineer, who he proceeded to yell at / berate about how we weren't meeting deadlines and how it was costing him a fortune, etc., etc. The senior engineer on his project happened to be one of the company directors. The director was sent an email later that day informing him that his contract was being terminated and 2 other additional projects he had ongoing with us were also being terminated and that we wouldn't be undertaking work with him in the future. We'd done a good amount of work with him in the past, he'd been problematic before, but this really crossed the line. Definitely cost him a fortune. We were the only civil engineer nearby to where he operated. Typically, design work of this nature has a 6 to 8 week lead-in time, which he'd likely need to wait with any other company he instructs, all over being that something was being completed 10 days late. He did end up pleading with us to release work that we had completed up to that point, which we did after charging him an H of a premium for it. Not a lawyer, but a friend of mine is. He is an estate attorney, and apparently some woman kept wanting to deed S that wasn't hers. He told her that he could not take her on as a client after 10 minutes and didn't charge her because she kept trying to deed S like her still living husband's car to one of her grandchildren, not on the condition that she outlived her husband and it became hers, specifically when she died because she didn't trust her husband to keep the car maintained. She demanded a plaque be placed in her honor at a local park. While the park did have a Donate a Brick campaign, that was a decade ago and you cannot compel the city to do that. She wanted to donate her boat that she owned jointly with her husband to a charity that disbanded years ago. She wanted to deed her house to the aforementioned charity on the chance that she outlived her husband. Again, that charity disbanded. He said she seemed a little off. I generally only handle serious injury and wrongful death cases. I have told dozens of clients to pack their bags once I determined they lied to me about what happened. Most of these liars admitted it to me in a way which indicated they thought the entire process was a game of be the best liar. They're going to lie, so I'm going to lie. You never, ever, no matter the weather, ever want a serious injury client with a credibility problem. We regularly put six figures in expenses and time into these cases, and I'm not about to do that if we have a liar for a client. Keep in mind, I'm talking about lying about important facts and not the "this is what I remember" when it turns out inconsistent with the physical evidence. I'm not talking about "I didn't mention this yesterday because I was embarrassed." I'm not even talking about "I didn't tell you I have been double filling my oxygen script, this was a decade ago, can't do that anymore, because I knew it was wrong." Just lies about what happened. I'm an investigator, and the very best criminal defense attorney takes public defender appointments. The clients who are lucky enough to get him, knowing that he was appointed by the public defender, often have no idea that their cases were hand-selected by him to work on, and they will often call him public pretender or disparage him for being a bad attorney, i.e. they don't like his sage advice, and fire him. I've even seen clients get money from their families to hire a real attorney and give private money to another attorney that also takes public defender appointments but has way less experience and doesn't do as good of a job. I always laugh at these idiots when they insist that they can do better. Not a lawyer, but had a dispute with my landlord a while ago that was in the let the lawyers talk to each other, but we are ready to go to court for this phase. At some point, his lawyer sent us some documents, including an inspection report for the water boiler, which caused the problem, that was done just before we moved in, which seemed to state that the boiler was in perfect condition. Unfortunately for him, we also had a copy of this document in our files, and there it stated that the valve, which was the specific cause for the problem, needed replacing. Having a closer look at the document they sent us, it became apparent that this part was very poorly photoshopped out of the document. Our lawyer sent an angry reply to his lawyer. Then I never heard of the other lawyer again, but strangely, the landlord was suddenly very open for the settlement that we offered him. So, I don't know what happened on their side, but my hunch is that his lawyer dumped him for setting him up with forged evidence. I was asked to collect child support arrears pro bono for a secretary at our firm. The child was already 18. The dad was in arrears, but legitimately disputed the about half the amount, as a lot of it was for expenses that were questionable. Also, the AGs had not kept tabs on anything. The guy was unemployed, and this was during the Great Recession. Finally, he agreed to the full amount but asked to pay over 5 years if, after the principal was paid off, we waived the interest. He even agreed that if he was even one payment late, we could demand the full amount with interest. Client refused. So I asked her what was her goal in this whole thing. She said, "I want to prove to the world what a lousy father and a bum he is." Fortunately, this was before I had filed anything or made any type of appearance in a court. So I told her that if she wanted to do that, she could hire and pay for an attorney, but it wasn't going to be this attorney. I had a custody case one time where I was representing the mother pro bono. The lawyer on the other side was representing father pro bono as well. And let me tell you about these two. Mother was in her early 20s and her income was from a part-time job at Walmart and government benefits. She never finished school and lived at her dad's house, who himself was not working and living off the government dime. She was missing half her teeth and her overall hygiene was horrendous. After meeting her, it blew my mind that someone would feel comfortable enough to have unprotected S with her. Until I met father. He was also in his early 20s and didn't finish school. He had a marked speech impediment. Mom told me he has some kind of mental health diagnosis with the word explosive in it and described how violent he could be. He was certainly no looker. For income, he too was on government assistance, but his Facebook was replete get-rich-quick schemes, which clearly never panned out. He was alleged to be selling marijuana as well to supplement his income. Well, Dad has other kids with other women in other parts of the state, and he is way behind on child support payments. So he gets scheduled for a contempt hearing for a failure to pay. He asks his pro bono custody lawyer about the contempt hearing, and the lawyer reminds him that he's only his custody lawyer and that he doesn't represent him in any other matters. So the day of the hearing comes and Dad goes to court without a lawyer. It doesn't go well for him, so he decides to blast his custody lawyer on Facebook for screwing him over in his support case. He also decided to call his lawyer afterwards to bee him out, but the lawyer wasn't in the office, so he spoke to the lawyer's secretary. We were scheduled for a custody trial the next day. It had been on the books for months. I get a call from Dad's lawyer stating he's filing an emergency motion to withdraw and postpone the trial and was seeking my concurrence on the motion. Apparently, Dad threatened his lawyer's secretary during his rant to her. We have an emergency hearing that afternoon with the judge, and Dad's attorney tells the judge what happened. I tell the judge I have absolutely no objection to his lawyer withdrawing. Motion granted, trial rescheduled for 3 months later. I don't know what was said to Dad by his lawyer, but I hope it was F you are on your own. P.S. 3 months later, he didn't show up for his rescheduled custody trial because he was again behind on child support, this time in another county, and they threw him in jail. I had a client come to me to do his will. He insisted it would be simple because he never married or had kids. I met with him as usual and went through everything he needed in his will, and I explained my hourly rate and how long a will usually took to draft and sign. He came back in a few weeks, signed his will, happily paid his bill, and left. I should point out 2 things at this point. 1, this guy was very rich, and 2, he could not name a single friend who he trusted to be a backup executor. As soon as he got home, he immediately wrote a long ranting email to my boss. He claimed he had been massively overcharged for his will. He said he had only spent half an hour in my office, so he should only have to pay for half an hour, and that there was no reason he should be paying for my time. He would go to the law society, etc., etc. My boss called him and told him to bring in all of his will and power of attorney documents, and he would issue him a refund. The conversation went like this. Boss, I don't have time to deal with petty garbage like this. This is a document stating that you are willingly destroying your will in POAs. Sign it, and I'll give you this check for all your fees back. Client, this isn't a petty issue to me. Boss, this is a petty issue to everybody. Client, I'll tell all my friends and family never to work with you. Boss, good. I don't want to work with your friends. I don't want to work with your family. I don't want to work with anyone who cares what you think of me. Luckily, I don't think that'll be a problem. Go find another lawyer. So the guy signed the document, and my boss dragged the shredder out into the middle of the lobby and shredded all of his documents in front of him and then went back into his office. The guy slunk out and never contacted us again. Thank you for watching. Guys, thank you for all of the support and likes. Subscribe to the channel if you're not subscribed yet. See you next time.